Let's talk about building an emergency fund, which is a crucial step for you to achieve your financial goals. I'll guide you through the step-by-step process. Let's get started. The first question that we have to answer is, what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is a safety net that helps you whenever you have unexpected expenses such as medical bills, car repairs, or even a job loss. The reason that you need an emergency fund is because unexpected expenses come up for everyone, and I want you to be prepared when they come up for you. Having an emergency fund has many benefits. It will help you reduce stress, and it will prevent you from making desperate financial decisions like relying on high interest credit cards. You should save 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. The specific amount will depend on your individual circumstance and things like your job stability. For example, if you work a state or federal government job with good job stability, then you should have at least 3 months of living expenses saved up in your emergency fund. But if you're an entrepreneur or you're self-employed and you work for yourself and your income fluctuates, then you'll need at least 6 months worth of income saved. It's essential that you keep your emergency fund separate from your other bank accounts so that you don't spend the money that's designated for emergency expenses. Once your emergency fund is fully funded, then you can put your money in a high yield savings account or a money market account, which will make sure that you earn more interest on your money than a traditional bank account. Before beginning your emergency fund, you should pay off any high interest debt that you have, like credit card debt. The first step in building an emergency fund is to calculate how much money you should put in that fund. The way that you do this is by calculating your monthly expenses and timesing that number by the number of months that you wish to save for. If your monthly expenses are $5,000 a month and you want an emergency fund of 3 months, then what you would do is you would times that 5,000 times 3, which would give you $15,000 for your emergency fund. The second step to building an emergency fund is to create a budget and track your expenses. Then you can identify areas in your budget where you can cut back and save more money. If you don't have a fully funded emergency fund, then you should cut back all non-essential spending until you have a significant amount of money saved. The third step to building an emergency fund is to stick to your budget. You should regularly review and revise your budget, but you should stick to it as close as possible. A tip to help you build your emergency fund is to automate your savings so that whenever you get paid, money automatically goes into your emergency fund until it is fully funded. The last step to building an emergency fund is to avoid spending money out of your emergency fund unless you have a true emergency. That money is not for vacations or any impulse buying. Having an emergency fund is important, but it is often overlooked by many people. Everyone knows that they will face a financial crisis sometime in their lifetime. And a financial crisis just means that you have unexpected financial expenses. And since we know to expect the unexpected, that means what we should do is we should already have money set aside for those events. Because if we don't have money set aside for those events, then what happens is we fall into these financial emergencies and it causes a lot of stress in our lives and we do not know what to do. But instead, when you have an emergency fund, what it does is it changes your financial emergency into just a financial inconvenience. I know for myself, when I had a car that broke down, but I didn't have an emergency fund, then it was a crisis. And it might have been a dead battery, a flat tire, or I needed an alternator or something small. But when I did not have that money saved, this crisis seemed like it was super big. And so with that, now when you contrast it to today, when I have an emergency fund, now if I have a flat tire, I need a new battery, alternator goes out, then all I have to do is go and reach into my emergency fund and I can go and I can pay for those expenses. So instead of getting worried and stressed out, instead it's just a little bit inconvenient and just takes a little bit of time out of my day to tend to those unexpected expenses. So in the same way, I want you to have an emergency fund so that you're not stressed out and worried when things happen, but you'll be prepared for them. And the reason that people live paycheck to paycheck is because they don't have any savings. That is the true definition of paycheck to paycheck. You are literally waiting for your next paycheck to come so that you can pay your bills. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, then that is stressful. But as soon as you have an emergency fund in place, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. Because if you mixed your next 1 or 2 paychecks or had a job loss or got fired or you quit, then you know that you have money in place to be able to take care of yourself. And so that just creates such a peace of mind for you that everyone should go and make sure that they definitely have an emergency fund. And so having an emergency fund is more important than that vacation that you want to go on or that new gadget or toy that you want to buy and things that you want to purchase. People don't realize that having an emergency fund is essential. I know people that'll go out of town, spend a lot of money, come home, and then they'll be dead broke and not have any financial savings or any emergency fund. And you should not do that, but instead we should be prepared. And what you should do is know that I'm going to prioritize my emergency fund, and I'm going to make sure that no matter how much fun I have or what I do, that I'll always have that safety net in place, because you know that an emergency will happen and you want to be prepared for it. So if you enjoyed this video, then what I want you to do is I want you to stay on the page and watch my next video, which is all about saving.